السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. راح نبدأ اليوم بأول محاضرة بالمادة الإمبريو. We're going to talk about first week of embryogenesis. First, we have to define the term embryogenesis. This term, it means the process of initiation and development of an embryo from zygote or somatic cell, which is named the somatic embryogenesis. Embryo development occurs through an exceptionally organized sequence of cell division, enlargement, and differentiation. Human embryogenesis is defined as a complicated process by which a fertilized egg develops into an embryo by cell division and differentiation of the embryo. It entails growth from one-celled zygote to an adult human being. It covers the first 8 weeks of development, and at the beginning of the 9th week, the embryo then is termed the fetus. In comparison to embryo, the fetus has more recognizable external features and a more complete set of developing organs. During the first 8 weeks of development, the concepts shifts from a single-cell zygote into a multi-leveled, multi-dimensional fetal body plan, which utilizes primitively functioning organs. Week 2 includes day 1 to 6. It involves fertilization, which occurs at day 1, cleavage, compaction, formation of blastocyst, and then it ends with the implantation. It occurs about day 6. Now, the female reproductive system, it is made up of internal and external organs that function in human production. These organs are involved in the production and transportation of gametes and the production of sex hormones. It starts at puberty, where normally continues throughout the reproductive years. Female reproductive cycle involves the activities of hypothalamus, which acts on cells of the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, which in turn secrete gonadotropins. These include the follicular stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. These are responsible for stimulation and controlling the cycle changes in the ovary. Second, the ovaries. Third, uterus, uterine tubes, vagina, and mammary glands. The female reproductive system performs certain functions, including formation of eggs, reception of the sperms during copulation, providing a conducive environment for fertilization, providing shelter and nourishment to the growing embryo. As I mentioned before, the first week of development begins with ovulation and ends with implantation. The ovulation involves egg release into the peritoneal cavity. This released egg will travel down the fallopian tube in which the fertilization occurs. At conception in fallopian tube, maternal and paternal genetic materials join, forming a new human life, which is termed the zygote. Cell division occurs with the travel down the tube and into the uterus. The ovarian cycle has 2 distinct phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. The follicular phase involves day 1 to 14, whereas the luteal phase starts at day 14 to 28th day. It begins with the formation of the corpus luteum and ends in either pregnancy or luteolysis. Both hormones, follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, they produce cyclic changes in the ovaries. They cause development of the follicle, ovulation, and formation of corpus luteum. The ovulation process occurs around mid-cycle, about 14 days, in a 28 menstrual cycle. The ovarian follicle undergoes sudden growth, spurt under the influence of follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, expulsion of the oocyte results from raised intrafollicular pressure. This expelled oocyte is surrounded by zona pellucida and layers of follicular cells, which are named the corona radiata. The zona pellucida is composed of glycoproteins. This figure shows the maturation of the follicles. Here, the primary follicles. This is one of them. Only one of them will grow, continue to grow until it reaches maturity. The rest will be degenerated. Here you can see primary follicle, secondary, and tertiary. Here now, the oocyte is involved inside the mature follicle, which is named the Gravian follicle. Later on, this follicle burst and the ovum will be expelled outside the follicle, surrounded by some cells of the follicle, internal follicular wall. These are the corona radiata, and the ovum is surrounded by the zona pellucida. Then this ruptured follicle will change into a structure which is called the corpus luteum by shrinkage of the walls. This corpus luteum here, it acts as a temporary endocrine gland secreting some sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Later on, this corpus luteum will degenerate, change into corpus albicans, which is the end stage of the developing follicle. The corpus luteum, after ovulation, the walls of the ovarian follicle collapse and thrown into folds called the corpus luteum, as you saw in the figure. This serves as a temporary endocrine gland. As I mentioned, it releases some female sex hormones, progesterone and estrogen. The fertilization process usually is composed of 3 phases. Phase 1 includes penetration of the corona radiata. Usually 200 to 300 million spermatozoa deposited in the genital tract. Only 300 to 500 they reach a fertilization site, and then only one of them will fertilize the ovum. During phase 2, which is termed where the penetration of the zona pellucida takes place, here the zona, which is a glycoprotein shell surrounding the egg, it facilitates and maintains the sperm binding. It induces a chromosome reaction. Release of the acrosomal enzymes, the acrosine, allows the sperm to penetrate the zona, thereby coming in contact with the plasma membrane of the oocyte. So, release of lysosomal enzymes from the cortical granules lining the plasma membrane of the oocyte. These enzymes alter properties of the zona pellucida. This is termed the zona reaction. The last phase of fertilization, the fusion of oocyte and sperm cell membrane takes place. After adhesion, the plasma membranes of sperm and eggs, they fuse together. Actual fusion is accomplished between the oocyte membrane and the membrane that covers the posterior region of the sperm head. This figure shows the 3 stages of fertilization. Here, this is the sperm penetrating the corona radiata layer, where some reaction occurs. Then it comes in contact with the plasma membrane of the ovum. These green color granules, these are the cortical granules. And then fusion occurs lastly at the 3rd stage between the 2 cells. The plasma membrane of the fetus, of the oocyte and the sperm. Also, this figure illustrates the stages of fertilization. This is stage 1, occurs in the uterine tube within 12 to 24 hours after ovulation. Here the ovulation occurs. This is the ovary, and this is the mature follicle, which ruptures, releasing the ovum. Then here the fertilization takes place. Second stage, this fertilized ovum will start the process of a cleavage, where the first single cell change into 2 cell structure, then 4, 8, and then it reaches about 16 cells. Here the fertilized ovum is named the morula. occurs at about 3 to 4 days after fertilization. Here it reaches the uterus where it will be implanted, and here the morula will change into another structure which is named the blastocyst. It will be implanted in the internal wall of the uterus. Here again other figure showing the phases of fertilization. This is phase 1. Here the sperm is trying to penetrate the zona pellucida, and here fusion occurs at the third phase of fertilization. This is a scanning electron microscope showing the ovum with these the sperms trying to penetrate the covering layers, corona radiata and then zona pellucida. Only one will be permitted to fertilize the ovum. Here you can see that this fertilized ovum start to divide into two cells. two cell stage. This is all again the scanning electron microscope showing the division of single cell into two cells. Then each one will give two cells. The number of cells will become 4. They're still surrounded by the zona pellucida. This is the blue color. This is the zona pellucida. They are still included in this glycoprotein shell. Then the number increase into from 4 to 8 cells. Each one of these cells is named the blastomere. The main results of fertilization is restoration of the diploid number of chromosomes, determination of the sex of the embryo, and then initiation of the cleavage. Here again the cleavage is the transformation of the zygote into the morula by division from single cell to 2, 4, 8, and until it reaches 16 cell stage, it is named the morula. This morula then will change into the blastocyst by further division of these cells. The blastocyst is composed of two different structures. It will be divided into two parts, the inner cell mass and the outer cell mass. The inner cell mass is named the embryoblast. The outer cell mass is the trophoblast. In cleavage, the total cell number will be increased, whereas their size is reduced, resulting from the abbreviated mitotic cycle. This figure also shows the process of cleavage. All the stages, 2 cells, 4 increase into 8, and then it reaches the morula stage. Here the structure of the blastocyst were the inner cell mass and the outer cell mass. This is a trophoblast and this is the embryoblast. The 8th cell stage of the cleavage is named compaction, which is caused by increased cell-to-cell adhesion. Cells that are forced to the outside, they become the trophoblast, responsible for development of the placenta. The inner cells will form the embryo proper and called the inner cell mass. Here, as you can see, this is the inner. This all are the cells that are starting to differentiate into 2 cell population. The outer cell layer become flat. They are the trophoblast cells. The inner cell mass are the embryoblast. So this structure, surrounded still by the zona pellucida, is named the blastocyst. Will be implanted in the internal wall of the uterus. The structure is named here the blastocele, since it contains a fluid. Here again, this is the blastocele. This is the inner cell mass, the embryoblast, the outer cell mass. They are more flat in shape. They are the trophoblast. You can see the color, this color, blue color, represents the zona pellucida. This is another figure of the embryoblast and the trophoblast. Also, the zona pellucida appears here. Thank you for your listening.